5.
Curry hits a three.
4.
Just on the drive. Deep left field.
3.
Patrick hit by Watt. Sack number 10.
2.
Messi with a record-breaking goal.
1.
Welcome to BSS Sports. Now, here are your hosts, Steve, and Trevor.
Good afternoon. Welcome to another edition of BSS Sports. My name is Steven Schill with the ever-lovely Trevor Struthers, and it is finally over. The Chicago Cubs win the World Series. Now, this obviously is after the fact that the Indians went up 3-1 in the series, and we could flip-flop that back to basketball when the Golden State Warriors blew a 3-1 lead to the Cleveland Cavaliers. But Trev, what do you think of the game? I mean, that was entertaining baseball. The rain delay, everything that happened.
I feel like there's not too many times where you can call a baseball game a crazy game, compared to the other sports when you have like hockey, football, basketball, when you have certain, high leverage situations where things are incredibly intense and crazy things happen. You usually can't have baseball, a baseball game in that conversation, but that is definitely one that qualifies for that conversation. Given the fact Game 7 of the World Series, that's obviously pretty big in and of itself, but just, the craziness that ensued late in that game was, including the mini rain delay, was just crazy is the word that comes to mind.
So we have home run after home run. The pitchers, you never really know what was going to happen. We had Mr. Miller Time, who wasn't as lights out as he was throughout the playoffs in that particular series. Do we praise the hitters or blame the pitchers?
I think you always have to praise the hitters. It's not like Cleveland pitched poorly in that game, and Cleveland never pitched poorly throughout the playoffs. Just Chicago is eventually able to get to guys that they haven't been able to get to all series. If you want to talk about praising hitters, I'm going to praise a hitter on the Cleveland Indians side. Rajai Davis with that home run. Like, out of all the guys in the lineup to do that, Blue Jays fans should know all about it, right? Davis was here for more than just a cup of coffee, and home runs not necessarily his shtick, but he'll never hit a bigger home run in his career than what he did there, even though they ended up losing.
The fact that the series went to 7 games is insane, but the fact that the score was 8-7 in 10 innings was probably the more insane part. Do you think that the game would have changed at all if the game was played in Chicago? I know that's a weird question, but everybody going into this game was kind of like, oh, well, it's at home for Cleveland. They're going to have the home field advantage, and it wound up that wasn't necessarily the case. Did one ballpark benefit the other team by chance?
Not really. This was really a road team series. I think the home team won 2 or maybe 3 games in the whole series. So, it was definitely a pretty road-dominated series when you look at the wins and losses. And, I think it would have been cool if the game was in Chicago just because it's Game 7 of the World Series and the Cubs hadn't won one in 108 years. But, I don't think Cubs fans would want to change anything from what happened. And, sure, you'd love to have home field advantage for Game 7 of the World Series, but I don't know if that could very well add pressure playing in front of your fans in a high leverage game like that.
And after some 100-odd years or so. Now, it is the offseason, so we're kind of looking ahead and seeing, okay, what's going to happen. There's different players that are being moved around, releasing, you're not coming back, and being signed. And Jason Grilli, the bullpen man for the Jays, is coming back. Trev, do you like this?
Well, yeah, Jason Grilli had a phenomenal year when he was with Toronto, not when he was with Atlanta for the first month and a half. But I feel like it was an easy decision to make. Grilli obviously liked being a part of the team, and he was one of the most trusted relievers that John Gibbons could go to. So he's probably going to pick up that role again next year. But the interesting thing is he's an older guy that's only getting older. I think it was an option that the Blue Jays picked up, which is what made him, on the team for the next year. So this will probably be his last year, maybe of his entire career. Maybe if the Blue Jays aren't having such a good season, they could flip him for something, but you're not really going to be able to get much for half a season of a guy. So the fact that he's coming back is tremendous because he's, one of the guys that you can rely on in that bullpen. The other pretty much being Osuna.
Now, in soccer news, the Montreal Impact beat the New York Red Bulls in New York, while Toronto FC dominate New York FC 5-0 in New York in the same day yesterday. Nobody thought going into this year that Montreal and Toronto would be in the Eastern Conference Final. this is actually happening. I mean, the countless years of Toronto not being that great, and then, in recent times, they're cracking the playoffs, just making it in for the first round and then losing out right away. But now we're in the conference finals and we're taking on the Montreal Impact. Sebastian Giovinco being lights out, the team doing phenomenal things, and I think Toronto as a whole is starting to come around. I mean, we seen the Leafs game the other day, which we'll get to in a bit, but do you feel like kind of like a buzz around Toronto where we used to be the city that always lost, but now we're like the team that always at least makes it into the playoffs?
The jury's still very much out on the Toronto Maple Leafs, but apart from the Maple Leafs, it definitely seems that way. I mean, we've seen the Blue Jays make it to what is essentially the Eastern Conference Finals in baseball, and then the Raptors go to the Eastern Conference Finals now, TFC. So, I mean, the Leafs are the only one really missing out, but who knows what this season has in store for the Leafs. The funny thing is about this whole MLS thing is if you were to ask both markets, both Montreal and Toronto, if they were to meet each other in a conference finals, which sport would it be? You obviously know the answer. I think everybody preferred to be hockey.
But it's not. It's soccer. But one thing specifically about the Toronto versus New York game that was played yesterday was those New York fans throwing stuff at the Toronto players after they scored. I think it was their second or third goal of the evening. But they were throwing stuff on the field. Now, look, for Toronto, when we throw something, we commit. It's going to be, something important. Like when David Beckham was taking a corner kick, we're going to throw streamers and everything we got at him. Or when it's just, an inning-ending play, we want to, throw stuff at a player. When this happened, no commentator, nobody said anything. There's no news article out there. Nothing is going on saying, hey, New York fans are throwing stuff at the Toronto people. Who cares? But for some reason, when Toronto does it, it makes national headlines. Trevor, can you explain why this is?
Not really. Maybe that is something to do with the specific broadcasters that are broadcasting when it comes to in the moment. Beyond that, I don't really know how to go about explaining it. I know David Beckham sort of made a big deal out of the streamer thing, and maybe that's what fueled the media making a big deal out of it.
Well, this just happened for the Blue Jays. Everybody's like, oh, the Blue Jays should not be allowed to have this, that, or that. And I guarantee Yankee Stadium is going to do absolutely nothing about this. Why is it that Toronto has to react when New York, arguably the biggest market in the world, won't do anything?
It's a good point. But I mean, it depends on if that something that was thrown could harm the player, this beer that was thrown onto the field at the wild card game. That obviously could have harmed a player had that hit Kim in the back of the head. So I mean that definitely has to be something that goes into that's factored in as well. And I mean obviously the Orioles players, Adam Jones obviously was one of the key ones, made a big deal about it. So if the players make a big deal out of it, then that's sort of what fuels the media making a big deal out of it.
Well, the players might not be making a big deal about it, but I sure as hell am. And so are the NFL officials. They've ejected 10 players this far into the season. That's 10 players. Last year they ejected 4. I mean, the NFL has kind of a bad rap in general, due to the players, due to Roger Goodell, how things are handled. Tom Brady, for example, as well as Bill Belichick, even though they've won, caught cheating in various manners, and it just seems to be the league of either no fun, danger, or fill in the blank here. Do you think the NFL will get removed from this stained image that it's constantly in?
It's hard to say because I mean there always seems to be something that only adds to it when it comes to the no fun league and stuff along those lines. The ejections. I mean, it depends on what you get ejected for. There are some guys that deserve it, some guys that don't. When it comes to the NFL trying to break free of this, it's hard to imagine that they'll do it under Roger Goodell as the commissioner of the league. Just because Deflategate's going to be around Roger Goodell for the rest of his career. There's no getting around that, and I feel like the NFL has taken a hit because of the whole sort of Deflategate thing. So, I mean, as maybe if Roger Goodell is no longer the commissioner, maybe they'll be headed in the right direction. But until then, I don't really think anything can really change. And
the Cleveland Browns still haven't won a game. Just wanting to throw that little fact out there.
Is it 0-9 now?
You know what? I don't even know, but the fact that it's gotten that bad is kind of scary. Kind of scary. But hey, you know what?
Very enjoyable, though. Very enjoyable.
Hey, you're totally right. But on the flip side of the coin, the Cleveland Cavaliers are 6-0. So you have one sport where you make the final, you go to the very last game, and you punt the pooch at home. The second one is you're horrible the whole season. Like, woo, haven't won a game yet, only halfway through, but you haven't won a game. And the other one is returning champions from one and currently 6-0 with arguably the best basketball player in the planet on the team. If you're Cleveland, are you happy or are you sad?
I think you have to be pretty happy. Cleveland has been known as like the team that just has, or the city that just has teams that lose. And I mean, now the only one that really seems to be losing is the Browns. And, I mean, it's sort of like Toronto in a way, if you think about it. And the Maple Leafs is the team that continues to lose. Although they're on a 3-game winning streak, so you can't be too hard on the Maple Leafs. But, yeah, I mean, like, I think you have to be pretty happy. The one thing I'm sort of wondering is, I wonder if the Browns are going to lose more games this year than the Cavaliers.
That would be an interesting fact, although one plays about 80 games, the other one plays only 17. But nonetheless, you could be right on that fact. But keeping with the basketball theme here, is the 76ers are still awful. Like, there's no helping that. They're the one team that still hasn't won a game in the league this season. But the good news for at least Toronto is the 76ers are realizing, hey, you know what? We have the big three, quite literally, Jahlil Okafor, Joel Embiid, and Mr. Nerlens Noel. And there's a lot of talk about moving one of those guys, and it just so happens for Toronto, with Bismack Biyombo beating Orlando, Jonas Valanciunas needs a friend. So there's a lot of talks about Nerlens Noel being the one between him and Jahlil Okafor. A lot of talks are that those are the two movable pieces. They think that Joel Embiid is good, they think that Ben Simmons is good, and they want to keep those guys. But, I mean, I'm not going to complain if Nerlens Noel joins our team, because what was he, top 5 draft pick 2 years ago? Not complaining at all. With that being said, though, is Jared Sullinger was kind of the player that we brought in to, kind of bolster the front line when we knew Bismack Biyombo was, not returning, and he is now hurt. So, do you think that the Raptors need to make this move now, or do you think they're going to kind of wait too long, and then they're going to bring in Nerlens Noel at the same time that Jared Sullinger is going to be back, and they're going to have kind of fitting both players in an awkward stage?
Well, the thing with going and getting a Noel, I mean, you mentioned the fact he was a top draft pick. What do you have to give up to get something like that from the 76ers? You don't want to give up too much for a guy that's essentially going to be a backup center. So that's something that has to be factored into your mind as well. And for the Raptors, I mean, for the most part, they're playing great basketball right now. And so I think for now, you just got to kind of stick it out. And maybe if the team gets in some sort of a skid, you kind of look at opportunities to make a move. But right now, the team seems to be fine.
All right, Trev, so you have about a minute left, so I'm going to give you an option. You can either talk about how DeMar DeRozan is the new Kyle Lowry and kind of the face of the Raptors and being dominant, or you can talk about how the Leafs are doing this season. Your choice.
You know what? We have to talk about that Leafs-Canucks game just a little bit.
Well, then let's talk about it. So they won 6-3, and there was a quite bit of a brawl during it as well.
It was a shindig, I guess is what you could call it.
What did you think about the game? Like everybody's saying, this is the passion that the Maple Leafs need to have. Is that something that you saw and you believe in?
I don't really know. Passion is something that you can get behind. I'm kind of surprised Nazem Kadri's not going to be suspended for that hit. But I mean, with that being said, I mean that's one of the crazy, very debatable hits in the sense of where was the principal point of contact, stuff along those lines. It was obviously a blindside hit, and definitely got some head. So that right there, I thought would have been enough to warrant a suspension. Another thing is too, Matt Martin. Does he have to pick on the 5'11" rookie? I don't blame Ryan Miller for doing what he did. But obviously, what comes with that is getting the ejection. Ejecting Frederick Anderson for skating down to the other end of the ice and going to hug guys was kind of funny. But I mean, I guess that's going to happen. And I think for the most part, that pretty much just covers the majority of what happened. Derek Dorsett is a guy that I sort of can get behind, but it's who do you consider, let's face it, Matt Martin is kind of like the goons that we have left in the NHL, right? Like, there's no more Colt Norris, Fraser McLaren's, but there's the guys like Matt Martin, which, I mean, he was going out there looking to fight with guys, and that's something that you want to try to get out of the game. A lot of people like Derek Dorsett should have stepped up and fought him. At that point, it's like, what's the point? That's what he wants me to do. If I'm the Canucks, I want Matt Martin on the ice as much as possible. So, I mean, I wouldn't want to fight him personally, and it led to Matt Martin just jumping a guy.
On a side note, Max Domi one-punched Ryan Kessler. Like, that was a show and a half right there. But that's all the time we have for today for this edition of BSS Sports. Make sure to follow us on Twitter and like us on Facebook. We're archiving every episode on YouTube at BSS Productions if you want to check that out. For Steven Schill and Trevor Struthers, you are listening to Alternative Radio.